Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to Providence. This is Mustafa Khan, hosting for Radio LUMS. On Providence, like in the previous episodes, we explore questions about our future as humanity on this planet, or maybe even off it. Today we bring you a very exciting show dealing with automation and employment with our special guest, Dr. Abubakr Muhammad of the Department of Electrical Engineering at LUMS. He is the founding director of the Center for Water Informatics and Technology and the principal investigator for National Agricultural Robotics Lab at LUMS. His research deals with applied robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, with applications to water, agriculture, and environmental issues. Dr. Abubakr, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mustafa.
So, Dr. Abubakr, we'll be talking today about, as time goes by, what will our workforce start looking like? What jobs will be in demand? And how will we humans adapt to an increasingly technological world? How will people compete with not just each other, but with robots and computers? Will we see an improvement in people's standards of living? These are the general questions that we'll be dealing with today. So, on to our first question. What is it, Dr. Abubakr, that you think drives automation in the world?
Thank you, Mustafa. I think this is a very, very deep subject. And this is not something that only engineers and scientists and technologists have pondered over. But in fact, philosophers and religious leaders have actually thought about these questions for ages now. To answer your question about what is the source of or what is the motivation for these kind of automations, if you want to call them that, or these innovations which supposedly make life easy by taking away these dull, repetitive jobs and replacing them with machines, you may find my answer to be a little bit unorthodox. Maybe you have heard about it, but I would like to say that this is really man's obsession with divinity. And you may be struck by that. There is actually, if you read the Bible, in the very first chapter of Genesis, God introduces man's creation, and he says that God created man in his image. And there is a similar hadith in our Islamic tradition as well. And because God created man in his image, so therefore, by definition, man also has this urge to create things in his own image. And I think this is where it is really coming from. So over the years, over the ages, we have always liked to make things that look like us, that are anthropomorphic, and the ultimate sort of dream that man has always had in mind is to create beings which are like man, or even maybe surpass its own capabilities. So I mean, at some level, it is that fire or that spark that our Creator actually put in us. Now, coming to our current age of how things are, and if you look at, for example, the economic forces, the market forces, I think the story goes back to at least 300 or 400 years back. With the starting of this industrial revolution, which is when these machines started to play a prominent role in our economy by economizing labor, by getting rid of our horse carts and replacing them with steam engines and with automobiles and so on and so forth. But if you look really closely at the invention of these so-called machines, there were seedings of smartness in those very early creations as well. So one of the examples that I occasionally share with students in my own classes is that of the steam engine. So James Watt, as we all know, he's usually credited with the creation of the steam engine, but that's slightly incorrect, because the steam engine was invented by other engineers and other technologists before him. The reason that we like to think that Watt was actually the main person who invented the steam engine was just a little thing that he added to the original idea, which was that of a flyball governor, which for all practical purposes is actually an incarnation of an automation or an automatic machine. It was basically a mechanism to control the speed of the steam engine, and it kind of did this auto regulation, much the same way as temperature is being kept constant in a room that we are sitting in by this air conditioner, which is pulling in air. So as soon as the temperature goes above an uncomfortable level, it switches itself off by itself. So that's automation. And if it goes below a certain temperature where you would be uncomfortable, again, it will just switch itself off or on depending on what the temperatures are. And this is doing all this without any help from the human being. What Watt created at that time was one of the first incarnations of this very simple idea, which we call as a feedback. And this feedback loop is really the start of it all. And it later morphed into these very, very sophisticated, intelligent machines, which we now see as self-driving cars, as drones, as farming robots, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, the longing for this has really been there for a very, very long time. Also, if you look into history, people have also used these automatas or these kind of automations for entertainment purposes as well. So, for example, the Japanese created these very interesting tea serving robots. They did not call them as robots, of course, but I mean, these were for all, to us, they would look like robots. In the Islamic tradition, there were engineers like Al-Jazari who made these very, very sophisticated water clocks and water-powered machines, which had these feedback mechanisms into them. And even before him, there were people like Banu Musa in early Baghdad, who made these trick vessels. They were powered by water, and they actually just were, again, tricks, or you can say entertaining sort of mechanisms that were for pleasing purposes, fountains and wine serving kind of automatas and dancing men and so on and so forth. And they got these ideas, especially from hydraulics, that were developed by the Greeks themselves. So Hero, for example, in Alexandria, he also played with these kind of devices. So the short answer is that, I mean, the buddings of these kind of robots or AI or whatever you want to call them, I mean, this automation actually has something been on man's mind for a very, very long time.
That's absolutely true. I think one of the most interesting facts I read about the early Islamic civilizations was that in Baghdad they had a boat which would sail up and down the main river all day long, and the automatons in the boat would play music for the people who wish to listen. And that was all just completely automated. So coming now to our modern age of automation, we see that a lot of industries are becoming increasingly dependent or using technology and advanced technology that is saving labor and using more and more machinery and, like I said, technology. So what industries do you think have already undergone significant levels of automation in our current world?
Yeah, I mean, I may not be able to give a very, very comprehensive answer of like what I mean, the industry, of course, today is a very, very complicated animal. I mean, it has many, many sectors. But some of the most complete transformations that have already taken place, I mean, they can be seen everywhere. I mean, we were just discussing this air conditioner, a simple device that you may not even think about a lot. But I mean, it is not even running a computer, so to speak. But I mean, it is keeping this room at a comfortable temperature all by itself. So I mean, that by itself is a manifestation of the success that this idea of automatic control and automation has really come into our lives in just a few generations. I think it is more important now to think a little bit out into the future. Like, what sectors do you think, or do people think that they are going to face this kind of a complete transformation in the coming decades and years? So many extensive studies have been done in this area. The things that we thought before that may not ever be touched by the automation, people predict that very soon we will have complete replacements or partial replacements. Sometimes, of course, the experts they overestimate and sometimes they underestimate about technology. But many of these things are coming very, very fast. I think some of the sectors where we may start to see these technologies to come in very, very fast, of course, includes the transportation sector, where there is expected to be a complete overhaul of the old sort of petrol-driven, diesel-driven, fossil fuel-driven automobile sector, which will be, of course, be driven by electric cars. But at the same time, the whole driver concept will also be replaced by something else. So the Uberization will also be accompanied by self-driving, by more automation, etc. So that's one sector. Once again, people were too excited about it, I think, and they were predicting such a transformation much earlier than what the existing or the current industrial capability is. But I think it's only a matter of time when this is going to hit us. Doctors are also very worried. That's another kind of an unexpected development, in the sense that usually we think of medical professionals to be like really very, very intelligent, and of course one of the most skilled human resource that the society has produced. But increasingly these technologies, for example robotic surgery or the interpretation of medical data, even imagery, I mean, that is increasingly being done by these artificial intelligence, robotics, and similar kind of automations. The performance has now reached the point where the doctors are beginning to get worried about their eventual replacement. So surgeons, for example, they expect that a lot of future surgeries will either be robot assisted or may even be done by robots alone. So this is not too much into the distant future, and the economies of scale are going to play out very soon on that. So these are just a couple of examples, and of course we can talk on and on about this, and maybe we can talk about specific examples if you want.
Yes, I'd love to hear you talk about something specific if you have in mind.
So one of the areas, as you mentioned in my my profile, that I have a very, very keen interest in is actually agriculture. And what I have learned most about and thought most deeply about regarding these ideas of automation and coming into societies and transforming the societies is the use of these technologies in the agricultural sector. And this is especially very, very interesting in countries like Pakistan, where again you can imagine that the interplay of the benefits that supposedly automation would bring versus the displacement of labor and the fears of sort of displacing them with something into a very, very awkward situation such as unemployment. I mean, that actually plays immediately. And as you may know, that I had this agricultural robotics lab, which is funded by the Higher Education Commission, where we not only try to develop technologies which are increasingly playing more and more prominent role into bringing such automations to our society, but at the same time I worry. I also think about how these technologies are going to transform the society, the livelihoods, the way that the farming is being done, the way that the rural livelihoods will be impacted. So that is also something that I have thought upon and compared with how these transformations have happened in other parts of the country.
So that's perfect leading into our next sort of discussion topic, is that what sort of challenges do you think automation faces when having to deal, especially with societies that up to this point have been relatively less advanced in terms of technology, like Pakistan?
Numerous challenges. So, of course, as an engineer, we or I and people who are working in my community, we normally think of technical challenges, that maybe we are not ready yet, and we are over-promising, and maybe we are proposing things that may not come to fruition very soon. I think the larger problems are not related to whether we will eventually do certain things or not, but it is really the acceptance of the society. So again, coming back to the agricultural sector, the fear is really not that a certain technology will just come and take over, because our farmers, of course, are very, very smart. If you show them a certain thing and they can see it work, the adoption is usually very, very quick. And if the economic benefits are also there, I mean, with the smartphones, as you have seen, with communication technologies, the use of social media, I mean, these have been adopted very, very fast by farmers and non-farmers alike in countries like us. I think it is really the unintended consequences of bringing these technologies and these new ideas into a society which is not really ready for it. And that is something that we should worry more about than whether a certain technology can actually be localized or indigenized or not.
You mentioned unintended consequences, that the use of automation and the adoption of advanced technology, perhaps before society is ready for it, like Pakistan, there can be unintended consequences. Would you like to expand on that?
Of course. So I would like to stick to some of the work that we have done, in which we are helping farmers make irrigation decisions. So as you know, that Pakistan is a water-stressed country, and using on-farm water is really a life and death issue for some of our farmers, because it makes economic sense if you are able to economize and so on and so forth. So what we have done is that we have made for them these very smart irrigation advisory service-enabled devices, in which they can install these devices onto their farms and get information about their soil moisture. So as soon as the moisture, for example, falls below a certain level where the crops will start to wilt, the farmer gets an alert. And in the same way, if the moisture level goes above a certain level, which will begin to choke the plant, so to speak, then they also get an alert. And based on this, they can actually make the decision of whether to use canal water, or to turn on their tube wells, or to wait for the rain to come in, and so on and so forth. So I mean, it's purely from an automation, AI, robotics kind of an idea. It's a relatively simpler idea, although putting it into practice has been quite a challenge, and making it scale has been an even greater challenge. Now one of the things that we have looked at more carefully is that what if this idea actually gets succeed? And thousands or millions or hundreds of thousands of farmers begin to adapt such water conservation technology by adapting it, say, in large areas of Punjab and Sindh and so on and so forth. And when we looked at the literature, what we found was that across the world there are examples upon examples where people who have used such automations or using such water conservation technologies, when they have started to do that with very good intentions, with the intention of actually conserving water that may be diverted to other users, in many of those cases it actually worked in the other direction. And what happens is that as you adopt a particular technology, whether it is this very sophisticated sensor, or it can be even something simpler like a drip irrigation system, or even a cropping pattern, which will help the farmer. The farmers are, of course, human beings, and the way that they interact with a particular technology is something that policymakers and these big investment bankers who come in with all these donor money to transform a sector, I mean, they cannot really think ahead of them. So the farmers, when they learn about the potential benefits of saving water, they don't just give away the water easily and throw it back into the system. What they do is that they actually do what economists call as rent seeking, which is that they may actually expand their irrigated areas, or use some other kind of a cropping, some other kind of crop that uses less water, and so on and so forth. So the same technology actually becomes trigger for the very evil that you are trying to fight. I mean, this is just one very, very simple example of a technology that is an automation technology, which is being developed with a very good intention. And in many, many cases, what we have seen is that the use of such a technology or similar technologies have actually backfired. So these are the kind of unintended consequences that one should be very, very worried about. And when people actually talk about transformations of big sectors like the automotives or the medical sector, and other examples that we have talked about, so I mean, it sometimes really scares me, at least at a personal level, that we really don't know where we are leading this world into, without thinking about what's really ahead of us, when such simple things as a little soil moisture sensor or a drip irrigation system is not something that we have thought about so carefully. Now, if you permit me some time, there is a very interesting fable that is related in a very interesting book, which is related to AI. So Nick Bostrom is an Oxford philosopher and an expert on AI technology. So he wrote this very interesting book known as Superintelligence, in which he thinks about whether the current artificial intelligence technologies would one day surpass human capabilities. And he poses this question of whether we should even go down that path or not. And at the very start of the book, he states this fable that I would like to share with your audiences. So the fable goes something like this: कि एक चिड़ियों का झुरमुट है और वो इस बारे में सोच रहा है कि अगर हम कहीं से एक उल्लू उधार लें, क्योंकि हमारे बहुत से काम जो हैं, उल्लू जैसा एक बहुत अक्लमंद और एक जानदार किस्म का जो परिंदा है वो हमारे लिए बहुत बेहतर कर सकेगा। तो वो जो चिड़ियों का गौल है वो अपने कुछ मतलब उनमें से कुछ चुनता है, कुछ 3-4 चिड़ियों को, और उन्हें भेजता है कि आप जाएं और आप कहीं से कोई उल्लू का बच्चा कहीं से उठा के ले आएँ, मीनिंग कि दे आर लुकिंग फॉर एन एग, मे बी एन आउल एग। अब आपको पता है कि वो आउल इज़ ऑल्सो सिनोनिमस फॉर अ वेरी वाइज एनिमल इन द वेस्टर्न ट्रेडिशन एटलीस्ट। सो शायद मैं उर्दू में बताने की वजह से उसकी वो सिग्निफिकेंस जो है वो शायद थोड़ा लूज कर रहा हूँ, बट नेवरदलेस सो ये जो चिड़ियों का गौल है वो ये समझ रहा है कि जो कैपेबिलिटी हम में मौजूद नहीं है वो हम किसी तरह से कहीं से मुस्तार ले सकते हैं और हम अपनी कैपेबिलिटी को शायद बहुत ज़्यादा जो है वो बढ़ा सकेंगे। सो अभी ये मामला आपस में वो डिस्कस कर ही रहे थे कि इतने में उनमें से एक, अब कहना चाहिए कि एक बूढ़ी चिड़िया या एक वाइज जो एक उनमें से एक परिंदा था, वो ये बोला कि आप ये जो काम करने जा रहे हैं, कि आपने सोचा है कि जब आप वो उस उल्लू के बच्चे को ले आएंगे और उसको आप किस तरह से पालेंगे और उसको किस तरह से आप सिधाएंगे और उसको अपने काम में कैसे लाएंगे। तो वो जो गौल था वो कुछ सोचने के बाद ये कहता है कि नहीं, हम बाय द टाइम दैट हमारे जो हमने स्काउट्स भेजे हैं उस अंडे को लाने के लिए, हम उस वक्त तक ये चीज़ विल फिगर इट आउट समहाउ। इस पे वो कुछ थोड़ा सा एहतजाज करता है, लेकिन उसकी शोरो होगा को वो बाकी की चिड़ियाँ जो हैं, वो बाकी के परिंदे जो हैं वो मिलके वो उसको खामोश कर देते हैं। So he ends the fable in this way कि वो जो अब कुछ परिंदे हैं वो उस उल्लू को ढूंढने के लिए चले गए हैं, और मीनवाइल जो आपका जो वाइज परिंदा है, जो कि जिसने ये मशवरा देने की कोशिश की थी, वो बैठा ये सोच रहा है कि जब ये उल्लू का बच्चा लेके आएंगे ये, तो उसके बाद क्या होगा, कि इन्होंने अभी तक उसके बारे में पूरी तरह से सोचा नहीं है और उसके कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस को पूरी तरह से जो है वो थिंक थ्रू नहीं किया, लेकिन उसके बावजूद वो एक ऐसे काम के अंदर जुट गए हैं जिसके कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस के बारे में को वो कम्प्लीटली अंडरस्टैंड नहीं कर सकते। मेरे ख्याल में ये जो एक कहावत है, आई मीन दिस लिटिल फेबल, इट एक्चुअली कैप्चर्स आवर सिचुएशन वेरी ब्यूटिफुली, एंड एक्चुअली दिस इज एग्जैक्टली व्हाई ही रिलेटेड in this book and at the very start of the book that all these robotic technologies, artificial intelligence, I don't think there is anything wrong with this. Like any other technology, I think they will have far-reaching consequences, and this will change the world, and hopefully for the good. But beware of the, you can say the unfinished fable of the sparrows. Huh? वो उसमें वो जो I mean that owl is gonna come back someday. And when it will be out of the eggshell, when it will also grow. So before we actually उसको हम सिधा सकें और उसको अपने काम में ला सकें, there is actually a real danger that owl will actually prey upon us before we put it into use. So ये एक I mean this kind of wisdom is really what is needed within our communities, and this is what I was coming to, that in our communities who are developing these kind of automation technologies, we are so much bent on advancing the scientific frontier and concentrating on the technique that we have actually forgotten about this wisdom that is also needed as we go forward and develop these kind of technologies.
Absolutely, and that's a very, very interesting fable. And it reminds you of something I've heard too, even though I can't remember where I've heard it. It's that we're so busy figuring out can we do it that we don't stop to ask should we do it. And you're absolutely right that embarking on something that, like you said, would have such far-reaching consequences for not just one particular group or one particular country, but the entire world, all of humanity, there really needs to be, there really needs to be proper thinking about what we're getting into, what checks and balances are required. And that's the question that I would like to address now is that what institutional checks and balances can we put in place to ensure that, first of all, the harms and unintended consequences of automation, of advanced technology are, of course, minimized, and also to ensure that the benefits are reaped by not just a few people who control the automation itself, but by the whole of society. For example, you were talking about the Industrial Revolution. Now, we know that, of course, the advantages were numerous in the sense that we had much larger consumption, where people's standards of living did improve in some ways, but the large bundle of advantages was restricted to a few people who controlled the capital needed to bring in those technologies, those advancements. And many people now say that the lack of such checks and balances in that time have led to ridiculous inequalities, not just within countries but across countries in the entire world. So do you think that we need to ensure that something like that doesn't happen again, leading to even greater inequalities? And if you do, what are some of the examples, perhaps even using the example you had of water and agriculture, using that as an example maybe, what kind of institutional policy checks and balances are required?
Mustafa, I think that's an excellent point. And I think like any other technology, these new technologies, whether you call them robotics or AI or automation, they would also need regulation. So in many countries around the world, AI policy is now a very, very hot topic. In fact, in law schools in the US and in other advanced countries, there are professors who are dedicating their entire careers and their professions towards thinking about not only just the philosophical questions, but also ethical and legal repercussions of using such technologies. So to give you one example, autonomous weapons. Much the same way as biological weapons, they need some sort of a regulatory control. Nuclear weapons, they need some kind of a regulatory control. Of course, autonomous weapons as well. To give a machine the ability to pull a trigger, that is technologically very much possible. But whether you should do that or not, that's an entirely different question. So think tanks around the world are now thinking about those questions. International organizations and forums like the UN and other places, bodies are being created, and I think some kind of treaty to ban or regulate these weapons is also a work in progress. I think in our own country, as you mentioned, especially in the sector of water, agriculture, and the environment. First of all, I should not mislead you or create this impression that all of this technology or most of this technology has unintended consequences or would have some kind of a harm. I think there is really great benefits that we have in sight, where the bringing in these technologies will have a positive impact on the society. So before I go into the regulatory aspect, I just wanted to recall, for example, like other information technologies, these technologies will also bring a lot of transparency. They will bring in a lot of agency to modify things and to make environmental changes, or in a good way, on very minute scales, on very fine scales that were not possible before. So just to give you an example, we have a very large, for example, irrigation canal network, the largest in the world, and we are still controlling it manually. Now imagine what kind of a workforce would be needed to monitor it, to control it, to open the gates, release water, look at water levels, all these kind of you can say laborious tasks which are error prone. And if we bring in these automation technologies, of course there is a lot of benefit that can be reaped from these innovations. But at the same time, I think the kind of regulatory aspects that are needed, especially in these sectors, they are not so much related to the bad use of or the unwise use of these technologies, but really to the aspect that you pointed before, that if these technologies they lead us into the direction of the accumulation of wealth in just a few hands, I think that is something that we should be very, very careful about. Now, in farming, what has happened is that the increasing use of automation, that has actually led to the creation of course, very large farms that can be controlled by very few humans. And of course, these technologies, whether these are satellite driven, remote sensing, whether these are variable rate inputs by large farm machinery, these are all capital intensive kind of investments. So only large corporations or very rich farmers can actually make those kind of investments. So to be globally competitive, the small farmers have to match up with those kind of investments. And what we have seen around the world is that even in the most developed countries of the world, the small farmers are being driven out of business because of this kind of an economic model. So this kind of technology, when married with this very capitalistic economic model, I think that is the danger, and that is what should be regulated. And again, this is not my area of work, but more and more economists and people who study law, and even philosophers and people who study ethics, I mean, they should join hands and create regulations, regulatory frameworks for the introduction of these technologies into our countries as well.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's any technology that is new or even something that advanced, it has a cost, and a huge cost that sometimes people or entire nations can't bear. And there needs to be some sort of, concerted effort to ensure that no one is left behind. Because these, like you said, they have great benefits for all of humanity. And we really should try and make the best use of this. Now, coming to our last few questions. What space is there for humans in an increasingly automated world? Because our population growth rates aren't slowing, but automation is aiming to, perhaps out of good intentions, but aiming to save labor. But a lot of people will be out of jobs because of automation and advancement. So what do you think humanity or society will do or should do to deal with that? Do we need a new thinking around labor and what jobs there are for humans? Is there bound to be some sort of conflict? Would you like to share any thoughts on this?
So, Mustafa, I think this is again a very, very deep question.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit above my pay grade in the sense that I am just a mere engineer. But I will just share my very kind of shaky thoughts. If the very purpose of existence depends on your particular skill, and when I say this, I mean, we have been told that इंसान अशरफुल मखलूक़ात है इस वजह से, क्योंकि उसकी ज़हनी इस्तेदाद बहुत ज़्यादा है, वो बोल सकता है, वो बहुत ज़हीन है, वगैरह वगैरह. Now, in the past, when the horses and the bulls, they became more powerful than the man himself, that was okay, because I mean, even if there is a more powerful animal, so there is no need for everybody to be a pahalwan, because I mean, of course, that laborious thing can be done by the animals. So that was all fine. But then people who are very, very intelligent, that intelligence was really considered as the pinnacle of humanity, and that it cannot be replaced. And this actually did define humanity as well. So हम जिस अहद में जिंदा हैं, यहाँ पर एक साइंटिस्ट का होना, एक फिलोसोफर का होना, I mean that is usually considered as the very purpose of your existence, because this is what we are here for. Now we are entering this new phase, this very new phase, which I think we have never thought about. We have never been prepared. No cultural tradition, religion has actually addressed this particular issue yet. That when you make the human brain actually out of work, so to speak, because there is actually a better mind who's going to be doing that work. And again, I say this work, quote unquote, to compare it with the physical work that was done before. So what is really the essence of humanity going forward? And I think this will be a question that will tease religious people, philosophers, deep thinkers, whoever, very, very deeply. As you said, that I mean, if all the mental tasks and all the laborious tasks are already taken over by the machines, then what is the human purpose? And what is the purpose of living? And what is the purpose of being in the world? How would you spend your time?
Oh, so exactly. I mean, it really sort of baffles the brain that, if I didn't have to work, would I even have to study before working? Because we study, we go to university in order to get a job. Even though, of course, we like to think we do it for a better reason than that. But yeah, if there were no jobs per se, because most of the work is being done by technology, by robots, honestly, I don't know what I would do. I think I would just waste away. because just thinking about things but not doing anything, I think that's good for a while, but you can't just live solely off of that. So those are really interesting points, Dr. Abubakr. Just one last question for you, ending on a hopefully happy note. What is one or two, what are some really interesting technologies or advancements, innovations that are happening right now in this field that you personally really look forward to working with?
Okay, before actually I answer that question, I may have created a very pessimistic picture for humanity at the very end, because I just sort of stopped myself from saying what my thoughts or my personal thoughts were.
Please.
And maybe I can just say
Of course,
at least a sentence or two on that before I go on. So I think while it is true that we will no longer be intelligent machine, I mean our intelligence may not be of much use, much the same way as our labor is already not of much use to the world. But I think the essence of humanity will remain in its morality and its being a moral animal more than a very zaheen animal or a very, very powerful animal. So I think that is what we will return to. So what you will see is a return to so-called spirituality, religious traditions, looking for deeper meanings, and in the time that man will now get out from its mundane existence, which is like getting up 9 a.m. in the morning and working at a place till 8 p.m. to really work on a computer or to code or to do whatever that we do these days. I think this will free us to pursue those larger questions, I think. And I think this is very, very important, because if you look at some of our very, very deeper kind of traditions, again, this emphasis on intelligence is a very, very recent and a Western thing. So maybe it will allow us to go back to our roots in some ways as well. Secondly, the future that we are talking about, I mean, that may not be so imminent upon us.
Yeah.
There are many experts, scientists, and engineers who think that, well, maybe that may not ever come. I remain hopeful in the sense that day will come. But thinking that this will happen in the next 5 years or 10 years, I mean, this is something that nobody can really predict. So I mean, that I just wanted to clarify.
We have time.
Yeah,
we have time right now.
Right. To come to your last question of what is it that I am personally working on these days and sort of more excited about. So I'll tell you just a little bit about our current work. So at the Center for Water Informatics and Technology, and there is a sister unit on agricultural robotics, where we are doing a lot of these agricultural robotics work. So what we are looking at are, again, gadgets, which are similar to these soil moisture sensing technologies that I shared to you about earlier. These are low-cost decision support systems for the farmers, for really small farmers, I would say. We are targeting many of these. I mean, we are making many of these technologies really targeted towards small farmers, because I think that is really a big issue in Pakistan going forward. That unless we solve issues for the small farmers to compete within this global competition, I think much of our technology work will not make much sense. So this is the development of these kind of gadgets. Secondly, we are making a lot of progress on the research front, where we on LUMS we have developed a research station, which is a crop phenotyping station, a digital crop phenotyping station, meaning that we have a very loaded kind of an environment where we have a lot of sensors and drones and robots which are studying certain agricultural practices that we hopefully will take towards sustainable agriculture. So these are methods to evaluate certain practices that will allow the farmers not to use a lot of inputs, like, for example, in fertilizers and pesticides and water and these kind of very expensive and environmentally harming kind of inputs. So those are the kind of exciting directions into which my personal research is now going towards. And in my group, we look at all aspects from development of technology to the consequences of these technologies and onto the larger society as well.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Abubakr, for an honestly very enlightening, very interesting, and you told me a lot of things that I truly had no idea about. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you had a good time. And once again, this is Mustafa Khan with Providence. You were listening to Radio LUMS. Thank you.